Hello and welcome to a very special episode of the App Clinic.
Today we're broadcasting our pilot episode of the GDG App Clinic, starring talented developers from Prague.
We thought it might be fun to visit Prague,
but we couldn't get the budget. So instead we invited one of the Prague GDGs to join us via Hangout.
We gave each developer a few minutes to introduce their app, and then it was our turn to give candid feedback on how to make their good apps even better.
We're hoping to repeat this with GDGs all over the world. So let us know if you want to be part of the magic. But be warned, Czech developers know what they're doing.
So without further ado, welcome to the GDG App Clinic Prague. Thank you very much for inviting us to your GDG in Prague. I'm a big fan of Praha. I love the city, been there a few times, not just for Google Developer Days, but for fun as well. And one of the things which I always come away from whenever I go to Prague is how great the developers are. It's one of the big reasons why Google has a big interest in what happens in Prague. So we are really honored to have this opportunity to take a look at some of the apps that you guys have put together, hopefully give you some feedback, and just basically hear from you guys as well as to what you've been working on and what inspires you about Android. So.
And I've been to Prague once on the way to Brno. That's pretty much it. So.
Great. Okay, so let's invite our first speaker.
Okay. Hi guys, nice to meet you. It's a pleasure to kick off this fantastic event, so I hope we get some great feedback. So our application is called Big Launcher. As the name suggests, it's a launcher suitable for seniors, for people who are visually impaired, and for disabled people. Mm-hmm. It uses big icons and large text for all the basic functions of the phone, including contacts, including messaging, including call log, and also it can launch applications.
So this is Big Launcher up on our giant phone, and it exactly as the developer said. Oh, and by the way, make sure you guys introduce yourselves when you get started as well, so we know what to call you. What is your name, sir?
Jan.
Jan. All right, perfect. So
that's a great name.
It is a great name. I feel like we're not going to be able to pronounce any of the names today, so we've started about as simple as it's going to get, and it's going to go downhill from here. Nonetheless, Jan has done a great job here. You can see Big Launcher is exactly what it says it is. It's a replacement launch screen. And it is exactly that. So it's got nice big buttons, bright icons, really easy to see what's going on. One of the things that I did find was during the configuration process, there's a setup wizard that you go through. And as part of that process, it feels like that's actually quite complex. So it's almost as though it's an app that you're going to want to set up for someone else, rather than have sort of the visually impaired or older person set it up themselves.
That's kind of the impression that I got. I don't know how else you could do it really, because obviously you're going to have some steps where you have to dig into the stuff that's in the phone already. Even at least just to set it up as the default launcher.
So that's something that you may want to consider is what is the target audience for that phase of the app? So if that's more for your sort of expert user, so yourself or whoever who's setting up a phone for your parent or grandparent, then you may want to try and make that a little bit more familiar to sort of the standard phone UI, and then keep the sort of large screen simplified stuff for the final home screen itself. There's also a couple of tips about the wizard setup process itself. It doesn't quite follow a standard wizard type UI. So in a normal wizard, I want to be able to go navigate backwards and forwards until I'm complete. And I noticed that when I was doing this setup, I had to simply progress. It was just sort of a series of questions that got put up on screen. I answered them, I chose my default, whatever else, and moved on. Now, if you're setting up, if the idea here is that it is for the older person to use themselves, then that kind of makes a lot of sense. You don't want to have to put too many buttons on screen, too much confusing navigation, just one big question, make a decision, move on to the next part. But I'm not sure that it quite worked. It was a little bit too complex for that use case, a little bit too basic for the more expert user. One of the things that I noticed through that wizard process as well is that you're able to select a language or go by the default. Now, I was a little confused by that because the phone is obviously going to have a language set. You can have the different resource folders to make sure that the correct assets are loaded. Was there a particular reason why you wanted to allow people to select a language independent of the phone itself?
Yeah, there's a reason because we feel that some of users can have a different language set in the system settings, but they want to use a different language in launcher itself. For example, some immigrants or people like that. So that's why.
Okay.
That's true. I think if I were setting up this phone for my mother-in-law who's Chinese, I think that I would want the setup to be in English, but she, of course, would want to see it in
Want to have
Chinese.
the launcher in Chinese. That makes a lot of sense. All right. I'm learning stuff myself. So when I'm actually using the app, so you can see here that the buttons are responsive, which is nice. Whenever you're building custom buttons, custom UI, it's really important to make sure that they behave the same way that standard Android buttons work. And so you need to have some sort of feedback when you're pressing things. What I did notice, which I'd be interested to understand better, is generally for stuff like this, it might be useful to have a long press which triggers the accessibility by default on sort of the Jelly Bean and above phones. So the same way where on action bar items, when you long press them, it displays the little help text telling you what it is. That actually
he mentioned
adds
that, though. He
accessibility.
said he felt like the long press was unfriendly to this type of user.
Yeah, and it could be. So how does one trigger sort of the accessibility talkback functions of the phone then?
There are two things. The first is that senior people got problems to distinguish between long press and short press. Sure. So we wanted to get rid of that. And then during the development, we got this idea or the possibility to use a long press for some other function. So you can turn on in the accessibility options that on long press the big launcher reads the activated item. Mm-hmm. This is useful for older phones with previous versions of Android, which doesn't have the Explore by Touch function. So even on these older phones, people can use this read by touch or read by long press function developed by us, and they can be, for example, be reminded of what this icon does. So when you create a shortcut for some application, you see only the icon, but when you long press on it, the description of this icon is read, so you will remember what it does.
Very nice, very nice. So, I mean, overall, there's not a huge amount of feedback that we can give apart from getting a little bit nitpicky. I think that the padding around the time and date along the top up here is a little bit narrow. You probably want to indent that a little bit more to make it feel a little bit more balanced. But really, a lot of the feedback is going to be that kind of nitpicky stuff. So we're going to make sure that we include that in an email and send you off sort of those details. We're going to get Roman, Nick, and Adam from the Android Design and Action team as well to provide a little bit of extra feedback on sort of UI elements to this app and all the ones we look at today, rather than spend too much time complaining about 2 pixels being missing from a particular part of the UI.
Although I did have one comment on the clock. I was a little surprised because I've always been told that digital clocks were less accessible and that older people would prefer analog clocks, but you used a digital clock here. I'm wondering, was that a conscious decision?
Well, it's again because of the support of low-res devices and older phones, because you don't have too much space on phones
That's
with
true.
240 by 320. So
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
it's
Yeah.
we also, if you turn on the option in preferences, there is also enlarged battery indicator and mobile signal indicator, and we are really getting low on space there.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point.
No, that makes sense.
So a couple of very quick last-minute points. So it does have an old-school menu button, which does display a custom, more easily pressable menu, I suppose. I'd like to say, I understand why you've got this, particularly for backwards compatible support for older devices. I did note that you still have the menu button, and it is a little more shameful in the wizard There's no need to have it available there. And here I would think about having a default mechanism on newer versions of the device which get rid of that menu button. So I know that there is a setting within the setup wizard which lets you optionally choose to have preferences show up within the UI itself. I'd consider defaulting that to on and hiding that menu button away. It just will make the app look more polished on newer devices, make people feel like it's a more polished final product. And the other piece of suggestion I would have as well, particularly around, so it seems like you're having to make a lot of UI compromises and choices based on what makes it easier to use by older people. I would, if you're not already, strongly suggest that you make sure to use a lot of analytics to find out exactly what people are doing. Are they long pressing? Are they then hitting back? Well, what are the behaviors? What are the choices? What are the outcomes of some of those compromises?
We did lots of testing with the UI itself, but we currently don't include any analytics in app because again it's about the target group. We suppose that lots of seniors don't have data tariff or mobile data at all, so we've created this from the beginning to be completely offline application.
Great. Well, I can't argue with that. It sounds like you've thought it through. So, yeah, nicely done. That's the thing. We could go on praising it, but that doesn't seem...
No, it looks great. Well, I actually, sorry, I've always got one last thing, but I think you've got a really good point that that you don't want to use the data tariff. But have you considered maybe doing analytics anyway and just storing it to persistent storage? So I feel like, especially in the scenario where you have a caregiver that's setting up the app, and then you've got the senior that's using it, it might be useful to have that data even offline to just debug issues.
Yeah, and you can also do things like store up the analytics and only upload it when it's connected to Wi-Fi. Those sorts of things might be
which all of you should be doing anyway.
That's right.
That's a really important step.
All right,
cool.
Perfect. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Great app. We'll send you through some tips, but basically, nicely done.
I think that's all. So thank you very much for your feedback.
Sure. Of course.
All right, who's the next victim?
Next victim, our victim. Okay, next application is Stocks Tracker.
Great.
Hello, guys.
Hey.
So, my name is Tomáš Vondráček.
Tomáš
Vondráček. Okay, cool.
Shortly Tom for you.
That sounds great. We can deal with that.
That's way more our speed.
Thank you so much.
Tom, it is.
Okay. So let me introduce my application that I published few days ago. It's named Stock Tracker. So, as name suggests, it's about stocks. So one day, I bought a stock here at Prague Stock Exchange, and I wanted to watch it all the time with my phone. But by that time, there was no application that could provide me data from Prague Stock Exchange. So I decided to make my own app.
All right, perfect. All right, so let's take a look. So one of the things that I really like about this app is just the story you told us of having a need that you wanted to have fulfilled and then building an app that fulfills that. I think a lot of the best apps come from people who have a problem that they want to solve for themselves. And so they build an app which does that. And I think that's a great way of knowing what your users want if you're your own first customer. So let's start it up. You promised it would be really quick as soon as it started. So let's, boom, that's pretty fast. All right,
nice.
So this is a really nice app. What I really like about this is how you've followed the Android design guidelines in a way that makes it really easy to use, really familiar. But it still has its own unique look and feel. So if we look at the front page here, we've got this sort of custom little thing down the bottom here, which is giving us the NASDAQ index, nice little graph control there. All of this is custom. There's nothing like this built into the platform, so that looks really nice.
Yeah, it's really pretty, and it's a good use of space there too, because we've always said don't put too much on the bottom because you don't want to accidentally press something when you're trying to hit the back button or the home button.
Yeah.
And so it's nice to see something there that that's visual and important, but doesn't have to be interacted with too much. In fact, honestly, the only problem that I had when I first picked up this interface was looking for the search button. I sort of expected it to be up at the top, and instead it was up at the bottom. Now, it's a perfect icon, that search with a little plus, like, oh, that's how I add a stock. No worries there. As soon as I found it, it just, it took a little while to find it because it wasn't in the place I expected on the action bar.
Feels like it should be in action. So that may be one piece of feedback, is to extend that bottom part out, move the button up to the top.
Yeah. We also, we usually say don't put a refresh button.
Yeah, if possible. I've got a little bit of, so I had a little bit of a look to see how the refresh worked. And it seems that you've got, within preferences, you're able to select your refresh frequency. So whenever I see that sort of thing, I get a little bit nervous. So I need to, I feel like I need to ask, how are you doing your refreshes?
Oh, beg your pardon?
Yeah, sorry. How are you doing your refreshing?
Well, the application starts alarm in a particular interval. It's not waking up alarm.
Okay, so it's a inexact repeating non-wake alarm?
Inexact, not repeating, but I set alarm every time I need to schedule next update.
Okay, so one of the things about that is if you're doing that yourself and it's not repeating, then it's going to trigger it basically the exact time. So you may want to consider setting an inexact repeating alarm, even if you then disable the alarm each time and reset it. That'll give the system a little bit of leeway to time shift all the alarms from the different apps and make sure that they're not waking up the cell radio sort of within a few seconds of each other and keeping the radio hot and draining the battery more quickly. If you want to take it even a step further, given that you said you have a server where you're remembering what people's stocks are, so if you want it to be really, really battery efficient, really, really awesome, you would actually do all of the parsing of the stocks on your server and then use Google Cloud Messaging to tell each of the devices which have those particular stocks listed that it's time for a refresh. And in fact, because the stock data is so small, you could probably bundle that within the payload. So you wouldn't actually need to do any refreshing at all. You can just tell the devices, Goog is up 10% and have it update that way.
So it wouldn't mind if there was a lot of messages, a lot of push messages from server to all those apps?
No, we have apps, social media apps like Twitter clients and messaging apps like instant messaging apps all use cloud to device or Google Cloud Messaging.
Okay.
There's no quota, very efficient, definitely the way to go.
Okay.
So that's something to look at. I think that's probably the biggest piece of feedback, which is going to really transform this app. It's going to reduce your latency. It's going to increase your battery life. It's going to let you hide away these refresh buttons. So I think that would be a tremendous asset. From the UI perspective, I was worried. We don't have the Android design in action guys here. Roman, Nick, those guys are kind of the experts. You've done a great job. A lot of these apps have done a fantastic job. You look here, we've got the tab strip along the top, and so you've got this really beautiful view pager implementation, so you can switch between the stock exchanges. You've even done.
Is that your own, or did you borrow that from the apps page on AOSP?
I beg your pardon?
Well, I just noticed that the 3D effect here, and I wondered if that's the AOSP implementation, or did you do that yourself?
No, it's simple page transformer that is available in support library, so nothing special.
It looks really nice.
Yeah.
And what really impresses me is you've got the view pager and you've also got the correct implementation for the draw pattern, correct in every way. It displays correctly, it comes in and out correctly, just really, really nicely done. So bravo. We so rarely see a correctly implemented draw pattern, even within some Google apps. So it's impressive.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And you've got the right details here. One possible nitpick, you've got settings and account within the draw. I'm not entirely convinced that that's the right place for it. I think the draw is better for just navigation. So all of these other things, stocks, portfolio, indices, and market news, perfect. But I'd consider moving settings and account back into the overflow menu over here next to select markets. And possibly even switch them around, move select markets into the, potentially move that into the navigation drawer. But these two things, settings and accounts, are things which you would rarely change. You'd set up once or twice maybe at the beginning and then never see them again. So you want to move them out of the general UI and hide them away in the overflow.
Yeah, in fact, things like select market I might even want to see in the settings.
Yeah.
Basically settings is a really good place to tuck away things that you don't expect to be used particularly frequently. So when you go to select markets, I mean, you're basically, I figure that not being an international super trader, I'll probably set up a couple of markets and, then forget about them and just switch between them. I do think that it was a little confusing in terms of how, a difference from the stock apps that I normally use to have to remember which market each of my stocks is listed on. That might be more of a US thing where we've got NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange, and we don't really think of them. I mean, they're treated the same for tax purposes, so I don't really think of them as being different. So, I looked for a couple of stocks and I couldn't find them, and it turned out they were on the wrong exchange.
That may be a really useful search feature, so that when you are searching to add, it works across all of the exchanges that you have selected. It's not across every exchange, but just the ones which you are interested in. That might be a really useful shortcut. I noticed when Ian added the Prague Stock Exchange, it has a whole bunch of default stocks set up. I really like that, because it was actually one of the pieces of feedback that I had was when you first start up the app, you end up with this screen, which is perfectly fine. Tells you to add stock, but it's kind of almost cheating, because it's asking you to add stock using a button which you will never be able to use again. So it's almost training the user to use the app the wrong way. I think it would be really interesting to instead have a few default stocks so that you sort of see a screen like this when you get started, immediately understand how the app works, and then are looking to add your own stocks, which you then do using the button, which hopefully will be up the top.
Another thing that a lot of apps do that I think I like a lot, I think it's particularly helpful, is if you do have empty space in your list, what you can do is put the outline of another item, which then if you press it, it will take you to the add page. So because that's the thing is when I look at these stocks, the first thing I think is, how do I get more things into this list? And if the button is right there, it's very intuitive, as opposed to down here in the corner where it's certainly visible but just not as intuitive.
Otherwise, like I said, really, really nice app. You click through, you have the stock details here with a nice, again, custom graph, which shows the stock. Looks much better over that time frame. And then you can click again further through, and I quite like this because you can actually annotate the graph and save that and even share using the standard share intent, which is all really, really nice. One thing I did notice, obviously you have the ability to zoom in and out using the the buttons at the top. I was kind of always looking to zoom and pan left or right, within this, so it's kind of screaming out for a gesture of some kind. And I think we actually have an Android training class around gesture support, so it may be worth having a look at that, considering it. I've built so many graph implementations in so many different programming languages over the years, so I know how much of a pain it is to implement that sort of second level of zooming and panning. So not a P0, not a high priority bug. Certainly the faster, more efficient updates is more important. But as a nitpicky thing, which might be really nice, I don't think I've seen any stock
That's
tracking
odd
apps
because
you do that.
I've built many graph libraries, and I think it's actually very easy to implement zooming and panning.
I guess we all know who's a better programmer. So yeah, let's see. I've taken a few notes. I just want to see if I'm missing anything here. No, I think we've covered pretty much everything I wanted to.
It's a great app. The thing really that I think we have to point out, and I don't know how well it comes out in the video, is just how fast this app is. It's completely smooth.
Fast. Yeah, really, really quick.
I put a lot of effort to make it fast.
Yeah, and it's paid off. Project Butter, big part of what we do with the framework now, trying to get everything to be snappy, fast, and smooth. Everything in this app is, updates. There's never any jag, never any latency. Everything just sort of works, which is really nice. Portfolio stuff here again tells you how much money you've theoretically made. Go back to stocks. It's all just fast and quick and intuitive. So, congrats, nicely done. We'd love to, if you do get a chance to implement the Google Cloud messaging, we'd love to hear about that, because I think at that point this could be an app which we could talk about featuring. So
yeah,
not that it's our choice, but we can certainly talk to the people whose choice it
Well,
is.
we certainly do have the ability to get into the pure Android.
That's
process,
true.
so
This
that's-
is looking pretty pure Android, but yeah. So once
Yeah, I
once
think
you get
a couple of little changes and getting rid of the refresh button and going to a different refresh cycle, that would be, because we need a stock app.
we totally need a stock app, and this is nice. So
Yeah.
yeah, definitely keep in touch. Let us know how you get on, and we'll see what we can do.
And add Hong Kong and Shanghai.
Okay, thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is application SMS ticket.
Hello everyone.
Hi.
My name is Ondra Zahradník. I'm from InMight company, and I'm happy to introduce last update of SMS ticket, which our team has just released yesterday. Let me say a couple of words about the use case because you might not be that familiar with it. Let's say I want to take a bus or tube in Prague. What I need is a ticket. And I can buy a ticket in a shop or in ticket vending machine, or I can send a special text message to some special number like this.
I love a man who brings his own props.
After a minute or two, I receive a text message which I can officially use as a ticket.
Perfect.
And what our application does, it remembers all those codes and special numbers for you. So you can, in 3 clicks, you can send a text message. You will receive the text message back. The application parses validity information from the ticket, sets some alarms to warn you 10 minutes before the ticket expires, fires notifications, and saves the ticket in the database for later reference. Later on, you can see how much you spend on tickets in detailed statistics. Let me say just some numbers. We have about 883,000 users, and about every second user uses the application actively. And we support 22 tickets in 9 Czech and 4 Slovak cities. What do we cook for the future? We would like to add push notifications to keep the ticket database up to date, and we would like to add a widget to make the order of the ticket just one-click experience.
Nice.
Okay, I'm pleased to be here, and I would appreciate any feedback. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming along. So I like I said, I've been to Prague a couple of times for Google Developer Days, and the folks from InMight are always impressive. You guys do some really good work, so it's wonderful to see. I think 2 apps from you guys nominated today. SMS ticket, we're going to be able to be pretty quick on this because it's actually really good. I love the simplicity. I love what you guys have done. You've got your custom branding, this sort of golden orange color, which is really distinctive, and it pervades the entire UI in a way that is kind of subtle but really effective. It's obvious what your brand is. Icon coloring and everything else really works. Once you're in the app, again, you have sort of this really subtle user guide so that you know what you're supposed to do. You know, it tells you right here you can choose to look at the list of tickets or statistics, buy a new ticket, so the whole process is laid out for you in a way that doesn't feel too obnoxious. I don't need to click past it, I don't need to go through a wizard, it's just there. If I order a ticket, you know, again, you're given the cities, all of this detail, so we'll go with Pilsen. And then you can, again, it's just this really simple click process. Everything's really obvious, 35 minutes. Buy ticket, and again, you've even customized the color of the text in this dialogue. Now, normally I wouldn't be convinced that that's actually a good idea, but it kind of works here.
Yeah, it flows.
It just feels authentic, and that's kind of the key. Like, we always harp on about how important it is to follow the guidelines. Don't change the standard UI in ways that will confuse users. And a lot of people assume that means that they have to create apps that look exactly the same as all of the standard apps. It's not what we mean.
Yeah.
We just mean that they have to look the same.
We did the app in
better.
orange, so why don't have orange dialogues? Or
Sure.
Exactly.
why should we use blue dialogues?
In fact, if you've ever seen our game review show, which is sadly off the air right now, but one of the things that we would harp on is when you'd be playing a game and would all of a sudden pop up a standard system dialogue and it took you straight out of the game. So having a skin for those dialogues and making it feel like it's part of your app without doing too much rearranging or alteration of the functionality is a great idea.
Absolutely. So if we try and buy a ticket, we can't because we can't send an SMS, which is perfectly appropriate. You guys have happily sent us a special version where we can add a test ticket, so thank you for that. That definitely makes our life easier. And boom, so there you go. You have a ticket, really straightforward, 12 minutes. It's got a little orange indicator saying that actually you're going to need to use this ticket pretty soon. So that's a really good indicator to make sure people, what you're doing here is adding value above and beyond what they would have gotten if they're just looking at their SMS texts in their SMS viewer. Change that metaphor, presenting them with a ticket. And now it's turning red because I guess it's within 12 minutes. We can click here, we can see the valid to and from, we can see the code, and I guess the code's important because I'm guessing you have to show that to conductors or what have you if they accost you, demanding to know if you've paid for your ticket. So you go through, you can show the SMS itself,
right? Okay.
Which is perfect, so that can all be validated, all consistent. What I really like here is they've actually used notifications really, really cleverly. So you have this notification, and it's a rich notification, so you're able to show the SMS, which again you need to do if someone wants to know that you've got a ticket. Got the details, and it's got an icon here, which if we continue to prattle on, which we will, this will become red. Boom, look at it, it's like I scripted it. So it's red, which means, hey, you've got less than probably 10 minutes before the ticket expires, so you need to get on and use it. Really, really useful, really, really effective way of using notifications. Now again, this is non-standard. The guidelines say that the notification icons should be black and white, small, etc. But
no, I disagree. I disagree because the guidelines actually say they should be monochrome.
Yes,
you could take that.
That's true.
There's only one color there.
There's only one color, so I can't argue with that. But again, it's a really practical way of showing more information in a way that just makes sense. You go, well, obviously it's going to be this.
Really
what
smart.
else would it be? So
I agree.
Again, really nicely done.
In fact, the only thing that I was surprised about that I kind of wanted to be different is I would love to have the SMS and the important codes show up in a much larger font. I imagine myself, needing to show that to somebody, and just my day is going to go faster if it's about 2 or 3 times as big as everything else.
It's okay. I'm sure every single person in Prague who uses the app, everyone in Prague who uses public transport is using your app anyway, so the conductors are totally going to get used to it.
That's true.
No, but it's a good point. It would be nice to make it more visible.
Same thing with the order ticket button. I think that could be bigger and a little further away from the status bar.
That's true.
I think that would make me a little more comfortable.
Yeah, it might be useful to emphasize the actions that you want people to take or the information that they may need and make that a little more obvious. UI nitpick, if you have tabs, you should be able to swipe between them. So you want to have that view page or implementation on the front page to swipe between tickets and statistics.
I don't know why we do tabs without view pagers.
Yeah, we should just not allow it.
Yeah.
So that's the only other sort of nitpicky. As well, when you've got the notification, so you've got when the ticket will expire, valid from code. I'd almost want to change it around a little bit so that you had made it a little bit more obvious how long until it expires. So you've got that countdown, it's indicated by red. I just want to see 10 minutes, 5 o'clock, whatever those two numbers are, should be kind of made bolder, made more obvious.
Yeah, the orange stands for 20 minutes, then the red one stands for last 10 minutes, and then it goes gray for expired tickets.
Expired. Nice. And beautifully, once I'm done with my ticket, I can swipe it away. Probably after it's expired. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that explains why I can't get rid of it. So that's fine. And I'm guessing, I haven't actually tried adding multiple tickets. Yeah, nice. Let's add lots of tickets. I'm testing you. But that works nicely. Now, one thing that you may want to consider though is that if I do have a lot of tickets, and that's, in fairness, probably not a very common use case, I risk flooding my notification bar. So you may want to consider collapsing that in so that it's just got the latest one and the total number of tickets.
I don't know how uncommon is that if you're traveling with your family, for instance. You might buy 4 tickets to the same place.
Yeah, but we still can group them.
Yeah, exactly. If you group them by expiration time, something like that, I think that would really work.
That would be great.
Let's see, and they do dismiss. Yep. Perfect. So nicely done. I'm going to check to see if I have any additional notes. Not really. I think the only real issue we had was the swiping between tabs. Everything else is nitpicky. Hopefully you'll find some of that useful, but totally your call.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, one argument for not swiping between the tabs is that if you can dismiss these tickets by swiping them away, it might be hard to distinguish between a swipe on the ticket and a swipe between tabs. But I think what we're really asking people to do now is an edge swipe. So if you've got something where you're swiping internally, then it's understandable that gesture wouldn't switch between tabs, but an edge swipe always should.
Yeah, the stock tracker app that we just looked at actually does this really well for bringing out the action, the draw at the side. It does sort of an edge swipe for that, which works really, really well. Perfect.
Yep.
All right, so we shouldn't spend too much more time on what is already a really nice app. We want to be able to take a look at a couple more in the time that we have available. So thank you very much. Really nicely done. And let us know how you get on.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you. The next speaker needs to jump a little bit to get here. Okay, so the next application is Swim Places. Sorry.
Hi guys.
Hey.
So just to let you know, I'm not a developer. I'm in charge of the project management for Viewport. And I'm the spokesperson for them.
Cool.
I'm going to talk about our app that was conceived together. Oh, by the way, my name is Jirka. That's one of the tough names.
Jirka?
Sort of.
Everyone always messes my name up. I'm
fine.
allowed to mess up other people's.
And this app was originally conceived by our mates, Colex, who designed the web application for Swim Places. And one day on a hot day when we decided to go out swimming and we couldn't find anything, we didn't have a computer with us, we decided that we're gonna create the app.
It's a good idea.
It's a non-commercial community app, which basically allows and provides the users with the option to add places that they love or discover new places that they haven't visited yet. The target group is pretty much like wild swimming enthusiasts, but also that doesn't mean skinny dippers, but it also does. Include them.
It's not against them, it's not for them, but they're welcome. Excellent.
Yeah.
They're welcome to use it. Yeah.
Let's take a look. Yeah, you can't judge you can't judge anyone's preferences on me. So I guess one of the quick questions I did want to ask. So it sounds like all of the places that get added are based on your community. So you're not sourcing data from anywhere else. You're asking your users to add places as they visit them. Is that correct?
Correct. It's correct. First couple were added by us, the most known ones, but then the community picked up and basically is in charge of adding everything.
Perfect. Okay, so that's what we can see. So if we look at our list, so I like that it knows where I am and gives me nearby places based on my location, but it didn't turn on the GPS, or at least not that I noticed. So it was all done quite quickly, quite quietly. I don't feel like it's draining my battery for something which it shouldn't need to. So that's a really nice touch.
That's good. You know, these sorts of apps, you don't really need very accurate location to be useful.
Exactly.
Of course, this one draws a pretty wide. We've got all the way down from San Diego up to Seattle.
Yeah.
And Madison Park Beach. I know that place. My One of my best friends lives 2 blocks from there. Well, he was my best friend until I found out his wife was working on the Kindle Fire project. So, and then now we don't talk. But
yeah, well, what are you going to do?
Tell your friend to add more.
So that's kind of our problem in terms of using it, is just that we don't, obviously there's not a big community of swim places users yet here in the Bay Area, because I'm pretty sure that there is a beach closer than Pismo Beach.
If you don't want to swim around here, it's awful.
Yeah, that's all actually
Not
true.
in the Bay, anyway.
It's so cold here. It's beautiful Pacific, and we've got the Bay, and you will just die. Then again, I'm talking to people in Prague, so I'm guessing if you enjoy outdoor swimming, you don't have a problem with getting cold.
No.
App looks nice. I think overall, you've obviously got a color scheme going. You've got the blue. It gets perhaps a little too blue here in that you've got dark blue at the top, then a lighter blue for your tabs, and then a lighter blue for each list item, and then a slightly darker blue for the distances. What it means is that your contrast is getting a little washed out. The app sort of seems to almost fall on itself, where the bits of white become almost too pronounced. So this little white bar that says places around me in the tiny, tiny text seems more important than it is, because it's one of the only pieces of UI that isn't blue. So you want to be really careful about how those color choices and that color template can affect the way that people are looking at the app. Overall, I feel like the list items, they feel a little bit too narrow. I'm not sure how high they are, but they feel like they're a little bit less than 48 pixels. I'm not quite as good at Roman when it comes to picking exact pixel heights, but it feels a little narrow.
Possible.
Yeah.
Possible.
It's a really small thing, but it makes a real difference in terms of how easy it is to click on things and to navigate through the app. So you want to make sure you're at least 48 dips in height for anything that you want to touch.
Probably, well, again, like on the last app, we'd really encourage you to use a view pager so that you can swipe between those tabs. It just, at this point, that pattern is so common that it feels wrong when it's not there, to me anyway.
Right.
And then the action bar, I think.
Yeah, so it's an interesting choice. So I'm guessing this is a split action bar implementation. I'm not entirely sure, but it feels like these buttons could just as happily live at the top as part of a sort of the standard action bar.
Well, basically they're at the bottom, since we couldn't really fit them in next to the tabs that are already on the top, and it changes when you flip it, into. When you flip it 90 degrees, it changes and it goes to the top.
Okay, and that makes sense. So you are using a split action bar. It's a legitimate pattern. It can be at times a little bit disconcerting to have the things along the bottom. It is a standard pattern, so I can understand why you've done that. Again, you probably want to see if you can lose the refresh button. It doesn't seem like an app that's going to be refreshing data so rapidly that a user is going to want to have to manually do a refresh. It makes sense in instant messaging or in email, where you're waiting for an email, so you keep pressing the button. I think the update rate for this is going to be much slower. So you're better off doing maybe a server push, again using Google Cloud Messaging. When something gets updated, you send it out to all of the phones to tell them, hey, there's some new locations. You may even want to include the location of the newly added spot in that Google Cloud Messaging payload. So then the app only needs to do an update now if that location is near where the user is. So if it's 1,000 kilometers away, don't worry, we'll do the update later. If it's right next door, hey, maybe that's going to be interesting to them.
Unless you're phenomenally wealthy.
True. If you're in like a Learjet and you're trying to figure out where you're going, that's true.
Yeah, so Sergey would use that,
sure,
I think. But
sure.
Other than that...
For the rest of us, not so much. Your list views as well, so you've got a lot of content in each of these. And it seems like some of it may be duplicated. So I'm not entirely sure what the icons on the left mean. I'm guessing it's the kind of place. So the seashell means the sea. The Loch Ness Monster means a lake. Is that the idea?
It's,
Okay.
So that's really nice. I really like that. I like the visualness of it. Makes it much easier to see at a glance.
I like that it's both color-coded and...
Yes, it's a picture and a color, which is nice. But it does mean you're duplicating data, so I don't need to see the word sea next to the seashell. Like, you should just train your users so that they understand that that's what that means. And certainly when you click through to details, it's useful then to say what it is, just so that they can learn what those different icons mean. But on this main screen, I want to see the name of the beach be a bigger, basically, make it easier to read, easier to see. That's the main piece of information that you're trying to pass on.
And same with the distance, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Distance.
Especially, here where we've got some beaches that are relatively close and then some that are very far away, it would be useful to have the distance a little more scannable.
Absolutely. One other thing which you may want to do, so if I navigate in, I have the ability to hit map or navigation, really nice touch. I would consider adding the navigation action to this main list view on the right hand side. Because if I was using the app, that's a lot of the time that's what I'm going to do. So if I'm driving up or down the Pacific coast and I want to watch the sunset at a beach, I'm going to take a look at this, look for all of the pink things, and the nearest one I find, I'm just going to hit navigate to find out how to drive there. So again, this depends on your use case, and this is a really good example of why analytics can be useful to find out, well, what percentage of your users are going through here and straight away clicking navigation. If that's a common use case, then that's something you want to promote. And similarly, try and decide, and this is kind of good advice for most developers, decide what do you want your users to do? What are the main actions? What counts as success? So do you want them to go through and read as many of these as possible, or add photos, or use it to navigate? What are those primary actions, and make that as simple as possible for them to achieve?
Right.
Yeah.
As of now, we mostly want them to add as much information as possible, upload photos. The navigation is just a candy.
Just nice to have. I get that. And so that's good advice, right? So then what you may want to do is consider adding one of those actions to this main screen, so that you can say, oh, I'm at that beach. So you just open it up, you go, oh, the one at the top is where I'm at, and have the button there to add photos directly from it. Now obviously that introduces a UI challenge. You're making it a little bit more cluttered. So you may only want to add that button for the item at the very top of the list. But it's something just to consider. Like, you want to reduce the number of clicks between the user opening your app and performing whatever action you want them to perform. So similarly, you've got the add here, which is for adding places. Obviously that's the main thing that you want them to do, to build up that community. So that may be another example of why, why it may make sense to have that sort of at the top, because when most people are opening the app, they're expecting the main actions to be up here. And so by not having it there, it makes it a little bit less likely that they hit that plus button. You may even want to go a step further, and if that really is the most important thing for the app, is to have a big button somewhere maybe above the list view, which encourages them to do that first and foremost. Now, I wouldn't always do that, but you can tell how important that is. So in Prague, you've got probably most of the important swimming places there, strong community. It's less important, so definitely don't show it to people in Prague. Here in California, they're missing. Most of the things here are missing. And so I open this app and I go, well, this isn't actually that useful to me because there's nowhere nearby. But if the first thing at the top of the screen was actually a button asking me to add places, well, that I can do. I know a bunch of places around here that I can add.
That's a great point. Well, do add them.
I will. I will take that as an action item for myself. But that's my point, is that you want to make it obvious to the user what do you want from me to do, and then I can decide whether that's something that is useful and interesting for me. So maybe have a look. If there's nowhere within 100 kilometers, make that the main option. Just say, please help grow our community. People do love that sort of thing. So that may be something to consider.
Mm-hmm.
Good point.
Now, for the ad screen, this might just be me, but I really feel like you'd get a better user experience and possibly more additions if the first thing was a map. Because you have this nice, positional thing. But what I really want to do is the first thing is I want to point to it on a map and then fill in information. The problem with this screen is that the very first thing I see is 3 or 4 text boxes and the on-screen keyboard. And that immediately says to me, oh my God, I'm going to have to do a lot of typing, and I'm not into it right now. I think I'll just go and do something else.
Yeah, it's a good point, because this is what you get straight away. All you see is the text. And you're like, I just wanted to thing. So what Ian's saying is a really good point. If this was the very first thing, so as soon as you click in here, you see a map, with an icon next to a quarry or a lake that I'm in, it's like, okay, great. So I click that, and then the next thing I get is it asks me for a name and stuff. And hopefully as much of this is optional as possible, so that you can just say, yeah, it's the Pacific Ocean. I'm
Do
done.
we still have the Places API that they can look up? 'Cause
I think we do, yeah.
We
I think
used
that
to
there's
be able
still
to do that.
an API from Google, a Places API, that allows you to search for points of interest. You may be able to use something like that to help make suggestions for users. I don't think
help
you're able
autofill.
Yeah, I don't think you're able to use the data itself, but you can use it as a way to suggest places that people can then fill in the data themselves. But do check the API terms of service, because I don't want to steer you in the wrong direction there. Otherwise, I mean, all of this is really nice. You sure you want to cancel? So this is a really interesting dialogue. Do you really want to cancel? All inserted data will be lost. And if I hit cancel, it doesn't cancel.
Because it's canceling your cancel.
Be careful for that.
All right, we got a bug right there.
Yeah. So make sure that you're getting that right. Make sure that I always forget what the correct button order is here. I think you've got it right, but make sure that you've got the yes, no in the right order. It's all detailed in the style guide.
Yeah, and maybe stay and leave would be better than cancel and leave in this case, because
you just want two objective things, which is clear which button is going to make you go away and which button is going to make the go away button go away.
Also, I would suggest not showing that dialogue if the user hasn't actually entered in any
That's
information.
a good point. If there's no data to lose, then there's no reason not to just let them back out.
And in point of fact, unless that becomes non-editable later, it would the absolute best user experience is if I haven't entered any data, leave without prompting. If I have entered data, save that data and leave without prompting, and then allow me to delete the data that I've entered if it turns out that I didn't actually want it. And that covers the 90% use case with the least amount of intrusive dialogues.
Otherwise, all of the details are reasonable. The only issue here I have is you've got those custom colored buttons along the bottom here. In this example, I'm not sure that it does make sense. They just feel a little garish. The colors are really strong, particularly around defaults. This makes me think defaults may do something really bad. Big, bright red button, like seriously red. I think that's 25500.
I know, it's like composing in Gmail. That's dangerous.
That's a big deal. So you may there want to, because if nothing else, it makes it seem like these are the two most important things on the screen, and that show is going to do something magical, whereas all it's really going to do is apply my filters, right? Which is perfectly appropriate, but I don't think that there's I don't think it's necessary to have them differently colored. Let's see. So, So this is one of the dangers of having all of your actions right at the bottom. It's really easy to accidentally click the wrong thing.
Yeah.
So I totally did that on purpose to demonstrate that point. Search would be nice to have search as inline, so an action bar search rather than popping up its own screen. Particularly that way you can see what is already there before you start searching, and having autocomplete in that would be nice as well.
I actually feel that way about filters too. I think it's a little harder to do, but especially when your filter is just a list of checkboxes, if you can pop it over, like drop it down from the top or put it in the bottom so that you can see the results.
Absolutely, and one thing which you may want to consider trying, so I'm not entirely sure how useful this would be, given that we don't have so much local information, but it might be interesting to apply filters by basically pivoting on what the information that you have. And so if I click on the seashell icon, if I hit the icon specifically, maybe that just shows me all of the seas, so it applies that filter that way, rather than having to go through the second screen. Again, I think that's something you probably want to beta test with people to see if that means that they get lost and they don't know how to go back. But something like that is a way of being able to click here. I get a list of all of the lakes, and if I hit back, it takes me back to the main screen that's unfiltered. I think that would be really interesting.
I would get lost on the list. I might be okay with that on the second screen.
On the second screen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's tough.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Again, basically, what we're trying to come up with here are ways to reduce the number of clicks to implement any behavior. So the problem here is if I hit filter, that's one, and then I have to unclick a bunch of these so that I can just get the one that I want. Or I can do 1, 2, 3. So it's sort of taken me 4 buttons to get there, and it doesn't actually look like it's applied my filter, which is upsetting. So
Also,
maybe another
yeah,
button.
I'm sort of wondering why I have a long list of filters with text when I thought you were training me to use these really pretty icons. You know, and if it had been with the icon, you might even be able to group them a little closer together. My main issue with the text is that you've got a bunch of checkboxes and you have to scroll up and down to actually use the filter. You don't want to pack things tightly and make them impossible to use. But let's say that, for instance, if you had just the buttons that you could turn on and off, and,
Right.
you know, you were highlighting them in some way to make them active and inactive. Reto, you need
struggling
a new
today.
microphone?
I think I just need to.
Is he blowing out your ears every time he does that?
Apologies. I need to figure out something.
But again, just, you know,
Just to like drag and drop
minimizing the
something.
amount of scrolling would be really great.
Okay,
But yeah,
cool.
I could literally see that, just a big box at the bottom of your results list with all those icons in it, and I could just turn them on and off and see the results immediately. That would be awesome. That would be magical, I think. Would it be magical?
Thanks.
I think it could be magical.
Okay, he knows what magic is.
Yeah, so otherwise, really nice. I really like the community aspect. I like the general UI. I like the functionality. Huge potential. I think there's a few little things which could make a big difference. So we're gonna, again, we're gonna put some of this nitpicky stuff in an email, send it through so that you have all of our feedback in one place. And we'd love to see how you get on. It's and I will add some local swimming spots. I promise.
Yeah, it's really cool. And just last thing, because we say this about any app that has community, is you might want to think about hooking into more community, so having some more information about your users. Maybe hook into Google Plus. You might think about it.
Yeah,
Anyway,
you could consider a Google Plus login
think
so you can
about it.
share the swimming places with your friends.
with your circles or whatever. Yeah.
Be kind of cool. All right, nice. Thank you. So I think
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. So I would like to thank both of you for participating in this and organizing this with us. We are proud to be first GDG in the world to host App Clinic.
Woot. Thank you very much for having us. It's been really rewarding, really interesting, and great to see that Prague developers continue to be some of the most talented app developers in the world. So
Yes. Thank you for giving us apps that
congratulations.
we didn't hate.
Yes. Thank you.
You don't know how hard our job is sometimes. Today it was easy. Thank you.